Welcome to the She Handled It podcast. I am your host, Arwood Becker, and I'm so glad that you joined us today. In January of 2017, I got the wonderful opportunity to go to California and train under a speaker coach who was really helping me tell story and just be better on stage. And today's guest was part of that training. And what I remember so vividly about first meeting him is that he had just this loving and kind spirit. And what's so interesting is after I got to know him, to recognize what he was going through was really, really significant. And so I'm so excited that he is joining us today to talk about an amazing woman who has impacted his life very, very significantly. So my guest today, Eric Hodgdon, he lost his daughter, Zoi, at the age of 15 to suicide. And Eric has found a way to get back up and really get through this journey of grief. He's sharing lessons so no one has to walk through that journey alone. As a coach, a best-selling author, and a speaker, Eric has trained thousands of people who simply wanted to know how to navigate the worst setbacks in their life that can happen to us all. My wonderful friend, Eric, thank you so much for joining us on the show today.
Arwen, thank you so much as well. I am so honored to share Zoi with you and your listeners. This is just incredible. So thank you.
Oh, absolutely. My pleasure. So before we get started today, why don't you tell us the song that you brought to add to our Overcomer playlist and why did you pick it?
Awesome. There's a song that I've listened to probably for the last 30 to 40 years. Yeah, I'm dating myself, but it's a song from Fleetwood Mac, Don't Stop. It is applied in so many aspects of my life. And I know that when I am struggling, this is a song that I can turn to and I'm right back in the game.
Yeah, I love that song too. It's
It's so
probably one of
catchy.
those you turn up to, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It comes on and I think that the edition that's from their 1997 reunion tour, or reunion concert is probably the strongest rendition of that song that I absolutely just love and will play over and over again.
Awesome. Love that. Well, why don't you take us back? As I said at the top of the show, when I met you, I would have never guessed that you had gone through and were still working through very, very significant loss. Yet this has been the launching point of your life and your life's work. And why don't you take us back to the depths of it in 2014? What happened?
Well, thank you. In early 2014, I was struggling to fight for custody of Zoi. We were struggling to try to figure out and navigate the mysterious world of adolescent psychiatric hospitals for her. And on January 25th, I had to say goodbye to my hero, my 15-year-old daughter, Zoi. Earlier that evening, I said goodnight to her. She was just going to go up to bed. And I went back to my computer to do some work. And I went upstairs to say goodnight to her a little while later. And when I opened her bedroom door, I found her. I don't remember much after that for the next few hours. I do remember driving home in my sister's car from the hospital that night and just saying to her, I don't know how or if I'm going to survive this. 5 days later, over 900 people came to Zoe's wake. And that number still blows me. 900.
Unbelievable.
Unbelievable. And shortly after that, I received so many handwritten letters from her friends and teachers and staff members and other folks that just knew Zoi. And the message was always the same, that your daughter touched me in ways that I can't explain, but will always remember. And in some of those handwritten letters, some of her friends shared with me that it was Zoi that came up to them when they were going into an adolescent psychiatric unit, because Zoi just could understand what they were dealing with. She had this innate sense to be able to say, that person over there is struggling and I want to help them. And so she would go up to them and say, hey, my name's Zoi. Look, it's not going to be that bad here. Kids are cool. Staff is all right. And you know what? When the staff isn't looking, you can draw penises on the wall. And I always, when I heard that, I gained so much clarity, not so much about what she was drawing on the walls,
Sure.
but I drew clarity on who Zoi was as a person. And it was just so powerful to see how she just stepped away from herself and helped other people.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I, as time carried on, I did try to work through my survival. It wasn't easy. There were some days when I felt like I wasn't going to make it. That could have been every hour. I'd be trying to make it from minute to minute or hour to hour. And eventually I would find ways to reconnect or connect with her friends. And that became the basis of my fight to not only pick up Zoe's torch and carry and continue on the work that she was doing and helping others get up, but to fight for my family and all of her friends to find our better days. And they're out there.
Because you could have quit. You could have given up on that. You could have just thrown in the towel. I'd never want to minimize, some people go, well, do you have other kids, or you had your family, or you had other people to support, but she was your only daughter, correct?
She was my only biological daughter, yeah.
Right.
I have 2 older stepchildren.
Okay.
And everybody in the family was like, what do we do with this?
Right.
Right. And you're right. It's those points where survival is questioned.
Right.
Do I have what it takes? And that's the journey that I think that a lot of folks are looking at, this abyss of grief and wondering, I don't know if I want to go down in there, because if I go down there, I don't know what's next. I don't know how to illuminate my path through this fog, how to clear the fog, how to illuminate my path, how to find my strength when I don't think I have any.
Right.
And that's the power of working through and walking a grief journey. That is not on anybody else's timeline. It's not on anybody else's agenda. It's yours and your pace. And if you can stay focused in that pace, or your pace, and know that you're not alone, and there's guides out there to help you who have done this journey before. They can walk with you, not for you.
Right.
And that's where you can really find those moments of, oh my gosh, like I'm really struggling here. There's somebody else out there that's done this. And so if they can do it, maybe I can too.
Do you think a lot of people, through the study that you've done, do you think a lot of people compare their grief? Like, well, I shouldn't feel so bad about this because look what they've been through. That's, doing this comparative thing. Do you see that happening? And how destructive is that?
I do very much see that. And where I think people see themselves is like, well, they're on the other side of their major part of grief, and I don't know how I'm going to get there. And so they say they take themselves out of the game right away, and they remain stuck in a survival mode for years, sometimes decades. And one of my clients, I was coaching her a few months ago, and her name is Lynn. And Lynn's like, it's been 30 years since my husband died, and I feel like I'm still on day one. Wow. And so we did a quick exercise where I asked her, well, let's imagine if the situation was reversed. If your husband was still here and you had died, would you want him to be sad and crying every single day? And feeling like, and she's immediate, no way, absolutely not. I want him to live and be happy. And she kind of stops herself in the middle of the conversation. She says, oh my God, I can't believe how much time has gone by, and how many, as she put it, how many boxes of tissues I've gone through when I could have been carrying on with my life and honoring him.
Right.
And she had in certain ways, but just the thought of being stuck for her became comfortable.
Right. And just the amount of moments that were lost along the way because of still being stuck in that grief. But yes. you said everybody goes through it on their own timeline. They go through this process, but there's still I would have to imagine you'd look at and go, 30 years to still be really distraught about it,
Mhm.
so, some form of recovery still has not occurred, right?
Correct.
And you have, through what your daughter had, through this process of losing your daughter, but then also looking back at the woman that she was becoming for other
Yes.
people and being able
Yes.
to honor that, you have now stepped into a place where you're now sitting with a lot of people in their own moments of grief
Correct.
and being able to help them recognize and have the tools that you yourself have learned through study and training and fighting to have this life that you believe your daughter would want you to have, right? Just
Absolutely.
like that,
Yes.
the woman talking about her husband, what kind of life would he want her to have, right?
Correct.
um,
Right.
and so that's what you now, that's the legacy of your daughter, is now imparting into you, of allowing you to impart into other people that not all is lost even through
Correct.
such significant loss, right?
Yeah. Oh, there are so many gifts along this journey. And I don't want to say that it's like, oh, guess what? I get to take a grief journey. Nobody thinks that.
Right.
Uh, but I think that at the very starting point, in Greek, Zoe's name, Zoe means life. And I know that Zoe would be so upset with me if she knew that I was letting all of those good memories from her life stop me from living mine. And so when I looked at her friends and they were saying, what do I do with this? Oh, okay, first of all, nobody's going to join her. Okay, we're clear, right?
Yeah.
And next, we're going to find a way so that you can get up in the morning and you can get dressed and you can go to school and you can come home, you can work on your hobby or the thing that brings you joy, and then go to sleep. And the next day, repeat that over and over again until that becomes the norm, despite how you're feeling, because that is how you survive. It
Mm-hmm.
is tying in, and if there's no meaning in your life after you lose somebody, you lose purpose. You're like, what
Sure.
I thought Zoe was my purpose. So the tying in the meaning with some form of movement. Now that could be moving a pen, that could be moving your body, that could be moving from your bed to the couch.
Right.
Sometimes that's all you can do, and that's okay. And so yes, you have to find those ways that just give you the what you need in the moment.
Yeah. And you've used the term, and I don't know if it's a term that you created, or if it's a term that you've adapted a lot in a lot of your coaching, but it's get up eight, or what is it again?
Actually, yeah, that goes, yes, it's fall down 7 times, get up 8. It's an old Japanese proverb.
Mhm.
And it's so I just felt like that was Zoe's force, that was her energy, that was her always her thing. Zoe had to fight back a few times on her own mental health from time to time. And but I always saw the fight in her. And I know ultimately that this was a decision that she made that just took her out, unfortunately. And I wish she was here.
Yeah.
But I just so honor the fight that she was in, and knowing that she was giving it her all. And that's all we can ask of anybody in any fight, in any journey, in any struggle,
Yeah.
is to just do your best. And there's no one right way to do something.
Do you
And,
think,
and I think a lot of people,
okay.
I'm sorry, go ahead,
No,
Erin.
go ahead. Yeah. You think a lot of people, go ahead.
I would just say a lot of people are uh, feel like it's an on or off switch.
Yeah.
And so they sometimes impart that, well, why aren't you over this by now? It's been 2 months. And I think that I chuckled only because I remember standing at Zoe's resting place a couple years after she passed, and um, somebody was there visiting another site a few spots down, and I don't know who this person was, but she stopped. She says, I'm sorry, for your loss as well. Who is this? I said, unfortunately, it's my daughter. Oh, I'm so sorry. How did this happen? I said, well, unfortunately, she took her life. Oh, well, you're young enough. You can have more kids.
Oh God.
Right. And so I stopped for a second.
Oh,
Now, I had gotten to a place of resolution where I actually imagined Zoe standing there in front of me and looking at me like, did she just say that? And
right.
I did not let it bring me to my knees, because
Yeah.
That's not the energy that I wanted
Right.
to take on. It wasn't mine to begin with. And so I just chose to focus on how I could continue on in my journey, and know that there are some folks that just can't, they can't meet me where I am,
Right.
which is
Or
that's
they
what
or they
drove.
just say things. I mean, people say things out of a moment of like they don't know what to say, so the wrong, the very wrong thing comes out. I have
Of
to
course,
imagine that
yeah.
that if that person had a moment to think through what they were going to say, they wouldn't have said that.
I agree, and people will respond differently. Here's my take on this: is that I feel as though when there is something that happens that affects you emotionally, your defaults come into play, and your defense mechanisms are just automatically, they go up.
Yeah.
And when they go up, you are trying to find a way so that you don't feel the same level of pain that the other person is feeling.
Right.
And so this is your brain's way of protecting itself and saying to others, uh, can we just be over this by now? Because I don't really like feeling this way. And it's coming out, actually, they're verbalizing it in whatever manner they are.
However
And
it
it's,
triggers them. Yeah.
yeah,
Interesting.
exactly. And so they don't have capacity at that point necessarily to understand what somebody is actually feeling. But when they take their own journey of loss, it might make complete sense.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
so it's just everybody at some point, this it's just an element of the human condition that we're going to deal with loss in some form. And loss is loss. It doesn't matter if you
Right.
lose a relationship, doesn't matter if you lose a job, doesn't matter if you lose your 401k, right? Loss is loss, and you
Mhm.
respond the way that your defaults have been developed over the years.
Yeah. Yeah. We had this amazing woman come to a women's event years ago, and she's one of the foremost authorities on loss and grief. She's been studying it
Mm,
for, I think, 4 decades. And she was such a dynamic speaker, really, really dynamic speaker. And, and so she was working through some of these, these typical trigger terms or statements that people make when they say, oh, my mom passed away, and it's like, oh, I'm sorry for your loss. It tends to, because I think that's just a lot of us, just like you, we don't know what to say, so we say that, and of course, what's the response? That's just, she said, she was like, what is the response somebody's supposed to have back to that? So am I. It's just like, it doesn't really make sense, but we don't know, we feel uncomfortable, so we don't know what to say. But she also was
right.
talking about how this this guy was talking about how he had lost his wife,
Hmm.
and this woman that I don't know worked for him or something. I can't remember the story, but she said, "Oh gosh, I totally know what that feels like. I actually just lost my cat." And
Mm,
they were like, "Wait, what?" And so of course it seems so absurd, but the woman was talking about. She says, loss is still loss. You have no idea. That woman could be, that could have been the only cat. She had no family.
right.
She didn't
Right.
have a spouse. She didn't, for her, it was a massive loss, right?
Yes.
But to
Right.
somebody who maybe cats aren't that important to, right? It seems absurd that somebody would do a comparison. But I
Right.
think that that's really important. And that was something I had read a book called, A Grace Disguised. I don't know if you've ever heard of that one,
Mm,
but I read it when we were preparing for my oldest son, my adoptive son, for the passing of his mother. So
mm,
I adopted him after she passed away, but he was 12 at the time. So,
okay.
preparing for that, reading this book, the author had lost in a car accident, severe car accident, their whole family. They had, I think, 4 kids.
Wow.
He lost his wife, his mother, and his daughter
Mm,
in one moment. And yet
yes.
he writes this book and he says, but you know what I've never gone through? I don't know what it's like to lose a spouse to cancer. I've never
Hmm.
gone through a divorce. I never
Right.
got fired from a job. So
Right.
that's a different type of loss I have never experienced. But yet
Hmm.
I know what it's like to go through this. But if we get into this comparison mode of
Correct.
whose loss is worse, that's
Right.
not serving anybody,
It is
because
not.
loss is loss, like you
You're
said.
right. Yeah. And one of the things that has come to me over the years is that grief and loss, grief is like a fingerprint. Each, there's a lot of similarities, but each experience is unique to us.
Yeah.
But that's what also makes it relatable to folks that have gone through the journey already. I don't know what it's like to lose a parent. I don't know what it's like. I know what it's like to lose a pet. I know what it's like to lose a child. I know what it's like to lose a grandparent. Um, and my experience, even when I do lose my parents, isn't going to be like somebody else's. However, the similarities in how I feel, because we're all pretty much wired the same. There's going to be just an emotional piece. There's going to have to be that survival mode that you're going to have to go through, or stay there. And most people stay there. But then you move out of a survival mode and you start to get to a place where you can get back up and you have some better days, but you're still trying to figure things out. And then eventually, when you start to come out of the fog fully, you transition to living beyond the loss, rediscovering your purpose, reemerging into life. And I think that that's where the challenge is that the resources that are out there today, they're focused on survival being the end game. It's
Mm.
not. Yes, we have to do that. It's necessary, but there has to be a handoff point from, okay, you're through survival point. Now what? And that's where I think that a lot is lost
Yeah.
on some of the folks that are out there that are struggling to figure out what's next.
Yeah.
What do I
Can
do with
I,
this? Where do I
yeah,
go?
can I ask you about, um, I have to imagine that there, as a parent, that there was guilt that came
Hmm.
into play after her loss, losing a child to suicide. What was it like for you to have to work through that? Because I mean, ultimately, that was her choice to make, but I
Hmm.
have to imagine there was a lot of that feeling. And how did you work through that as a parent?
That's a fantastic question, and yes, that is a very big question that I get from my coaching students and my students of just what do I do with this guilt? And when I was doing, for about 18 months after Zoe died, I had started to tell myself a story, and this is really important. The story that we tell ourselves is key with how we process guilt. But the story I was telling myself was that I should have been a better dad for you. I should have seen this coming. What kind of dad lets his daughter die? And I could obviously go back, and hindsight's always 2020 here. That only amplifies the grief and the guilt 10x. And so what pattern I got stuck into was that I was getting off the train. I was working in Boston at the time, and I would take the commuter rail home to the town I lived in Norwood. And I would get off the train, get in my car. It was a 2-mile drive from the train station to my house. And inevitably by mile one, I would start crying and I would start talking out loud. Oh my God, Zoe, you should still be here. I should have been a bad dad for you. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. And that was every day, and it was just this pattern. I got stuck in this habitual pattern of repeating this, and so that became my truth.
Mm.
And then I remember one day I left work early because I was just struggling to make it through the day, and I cried on the entire way home from the on the commuter rail. And the second I got in my car, I put my head in my hands and just sobbed for about 10 minutes, and it felt like an hour. My windows were fogging up, and I just went 10x on screaming. I didn't care if anybody heard me. Oh my God, Zoe, I'm so sorry. I cannot believe that I did not help you in some way. And I was able to drive. I don't know how, because I could barely see. My eyes were swollen. And it was as if Zoe was sitting in the seat next to me, and I heard her voice say, Dad, cut it out. I'm okay. And I froze, and I didn't say a word until I got home and I pulled into my driveway and I sat there for a second. And I'm like, oh my God, she's right. She is okay now. I did everything I possibly could for Zoe while she was here. I fought for her to make sure that she had the right care. I went to see her when she was in the hospital. I stayed with her at night when she was sick and she was struggling and she was crying. I did everything I could with the knowledge that I had. I couldn't have done any better. I don't have a crystal ball for the future. I did not know this was going to happen. And so all I could do was just fall back on what I did do and have to accept and come to some sort of resolution that that was the best that could have happened for Zoe. And so I started to work through that, and I'd have to remind myself, and this is where the guilt started to shift away from guilt to more of, okay, this isn't serving me. It's not serving her friends and the people that need to hear about Zoe's story so that they can get back up. And so I started to tell myself, and then I started to share this story, the same one I just shared with you, because it's important. We can begin to look at our own guilt and be like, well, what's the truth here? What's the story I'm telling myself?
And how is it serving you?
Exactly. How is it serving you right now? Are you making a decision to heal, or are you making a decision to continue to hurt?
Hmm.
Because you have access to both of those decisions, and they're easy to make,
Right.
and they both require work. So why not make the decision to heal?
So good. So it's such an emotional story. I just thank you so much, because I personally, haven't gone through that kind of loss. And yet I have to imagine there are so many parents that are facing the same reality, trying to, get to that moment where
Mhm.
they can have a feeling of peace inside, that they were not the cause, the reason, that what they did was enough. And I just
Yes.
thank you so much for sharing that.
Thank
I
you.
know for you, I have your book here. Obviously, if you're just listening to this podcast, you can't see it, but Eric's book, A Sherpa Named Zoi, How to Walk Through Grief and Live with Intention. And I had told you, when I was going through a major crisis a couple of years ago, this was the book that really helped me during that time, even though I was not going through a physical loss of an individual. I was going
Mhm.
through a major loss in my own life. And that has become your story. Your story is being able to reach into people's lives who are in this place of grief and loss, and be able to provide them hope that tomorrow will be better. But
Yeah.
there's things that need to be done along the way to get through it, right?
Right. Absolutely. We just can't never give up. I mean, that's falling down 7 times and getting back up 8. I mean, you're 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 only as strong as what you've been through in life, and we all are just innately wired to be strong. We just have to access it and find ways to access it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
That's
it's not entirely easy either to do that.
no, no, nobody said that this was an easy process. That's for sure.
Right. That's
Yeah.
true.
But it is just like you said, sometimes it's just putting your feet on the floor, just moving from one space to the next. It's just
Yeah.
being willing to move a little bit and to make a little bit of progress, and not focus, doing this future tripping of looking, what is it going to be like a year and a half down the road? And what if
Hmm.
this, and playing that game, because that's just devastating. But if we can just focus on today in the moment, and
Yes.
go easy on ourselves and have some grace, and use the tools that I know that you provide for your coaching clients, that your book provides as well. It's just a really, really powerful piece. And I know that at the end of the show, you're going to provide some of those resources for all of us as well. So, as we kind of get to wrapping up, there are so many pieces that I know you have taken out of this loss of such a beautiful young lady. And I love it, because there's a picture on the back of the book of the two of you, which is just so
My favorite shot
precious,
of Zoe. Yeah.
so precious. But what would you say for our listeners are really the three biggest things that you've taken away from this experience?
Well, first of all, one of the biggest takeaways that I know of is that survival is not the end game. It can't be. It's a part of the process, but it's not where you stop. Um, and if I think if you have the ability to move past survival mode and figure out ways to get back up consistently, then it does lead into those better days and living beyond the loss, truly, and honoring your loved one. It's okay to actually live your life and honor your loved one at the same time.
Mm,
And I think
yes.
another big takeaway is that it's okay to own what's going on and not let it own you, uh, because you are the one that is walking in your own shoes. No one's walking for you, and no one can. And I think the final one is that in the end, when you're taking your last breath, Is it a deep breath of accomplishment that I did everything that I possibly could while I was here? Or is it a very short breath of regret? And so those are really the three things that I've taken away from this journey, that I keep them posted at my house. I remind myself of them often, and sometimes I do forget, and I just have to, it's okay. We fall off the trail. Sometimes you got to get back on the trail and the path and keep
Yeah.
going.
Life isn't in a straight line.
No, I kind of wish it was, but it's not.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I think we
yeah,
all do. Oh my gosh, just I'm so honored for you to share your heart and your journey and her story and your story, as they're all intertwined. And and our lives are. I mean, your life and your journey has affected mine, and has been such a huge benefit for me and other
good.
people.
I'm
And
so glad to hear that.
oh, I'm so grateful. So now we're down to our last three questions, the rapid
Right.
fire. So
Sure.
here we go. What is the best piece of financial wisdom that you've been given?
It has been to get educated. If a lot of people, me included, I may have jumped into some things financially that I wasn't prepared for.
Me too.
Right. And so the biggest lesson, it's a life lesson as well. I got to get educated before I make some decisions. But you're never going to have 100% of what you need. You just need to move on what you do have. But getting educated is really key to help you move forward, and you figure out the rest along the way.
Yeah, that's great advice. Really good advice. What is a favorite book and why? And certainly your book and all the details will be in the show notes as well. And I'd love to know how we can get a hold of your book. But what's a favorite book that you have?
Well, I did read your book recently, and I absolutely loved it. So thank you so much for putting that together. That's very helpful. I'm going to give a copy to all my friends, all my single moms, all my married moms. This is such a fantastic resource. But
Thank you.
I think that my favorite book is this 5-minute journal. And I'll tell you why. It's because we get to write our gratitude in this journal versus it being written for us.
Mm,
So we get to write our own story. And how powerful is that when you're struggling to be able to pull up a page and look at the gratitude that you have for what is currently in your life,
mm,
and know that you can still be grateful for what was as well.
yeah.
And when I filled out my journal, probably every day for the 6 months the journal is, Zoe was at the top of the list for gratitude. I am so grateful that I got to be her dad. But that allowed me, once I started to express that gratitude, to just flourish and it be okay for me to work through this.
Mm, beautiful. And what is a favorite quote of yours?
I'm going to go back to this Japanese proverb: to fall down 7 times and get back up 8. You know, it just hits me. And it's been something that I can always refer back to. There's some power with that no matter what, if you get knocked down, you just always have to get back up that one more time. And there's a reason for that. There's a benefit to that, to you, to do that.
Mm-hmm. So good. How can we all get a hold of you? I know we're going to have a lot of details in the show notes, but tell us all about the wonderful things about you.
I appreciate that, Erwin. So I do have a website. It's erichodgdon.com. That's ERICHODGDON.com. I'm on Instagram at Eric B. Hodgdon. I'm about to launch an online course called Surviving the Loss. And so I would like to make a special offer to your guests here to join me on a webinar on
Perfect.
March 23rd, where we're going to talk about the 5 survival not being the freedom from your grief. And we're going to tackle the 5 myths that keep you stuck for years and what to do about that. But especially, one of the myths is that your finances will take care of themselves. And I think you can relate to that one, Arlen, right?
Yep.
And so I'm only making this webinar available to your audience. And
Perfect.
so I think that if they are struggling with any type of loss right now, this webinar is going to help them get connected to what they can do about that, especially the myths that they tell themselves. And
Yep.
then,
And oh, go ahead.
I'm sorry, I just say finally with the book that my book is available on Amazon in both Kindle format and paperback.
Yeah, and I want to reiterate, the book, and I know that the online course as well will serve in the same way, is that what you have learned throughout this process of grief and moving through it, and then actively working to be able to help turn around and be that helping hand to other people. I'm telling you, anybody who hears me, you will get tremendous benefit out of this. If this isn't the loss of a family member, again, it could be a loss of what you thought was going to be and what
Right.
COVID 2020 took away
Exactly.
from a lot of us.
Hmm.
And loss just comes in all different forms, but again, it's not about comparing to one another. It's about going, this is what I'm feeling right now, and how do I actively help move myself through this? What are the tools that I need? Because just like Eric said, it's about getting educated, whether that's about finances, whether that's about loss, whether that's about parenting. We have to do the work. We have to put the work in to be able to get what it is that we want. So please take advantage of these resources. I know that they are going to tremendously bless you, and you have blessed me, my friend.
You as well, Arwen. Thank you again so much. And I'm so grateful for you and anybody that is out there that is struggling. You're not alone. You're not alone. And Arwen is just a fantastic resource on so many levels and what she's providing with this podcast. And so thank you for making that available. You're helping so many people as well, Arwen. So thank you so much.
Oh, that means the world to me. Well, I thank you, my friend. Thank you so much for the time and coming on. And we will look forward to seeing you soon.
You too. Thank you, Arwen.